Hi, I'm Leanne Harris, CEO for Keller Williams Portland Central. And today on Getting to Know Your Realtor, we have Mark Charlesworth with us. Hi, Mark. How are you?
Hey guys, I'm great. Thanks for having me, Leanne. Mark Charlesworth here with the Mark Charlesworth Real Estate Team. It's exciting to see us here, Leanne. This is great.
Well, what I love about it is, and I love to surprise people as soon as we get on the podcast, is that you and I are Portland natives, and we used to go to underage nightclubs together when we were younger.
That's right. I've known Leanne since she was probably 17 or 18 years old.
I think 14, actually 14.
Okay, wow.
Long time in the Portland arena. And I think that, people like us, we're unicorns. We've been around for a long time. We've seen our city evolve, and we've been through a lot. And I think that that's also what gives us that leg up in the housing market. So I have some great questions set out for you today. And the first one is, tell us your journey in real estate.
Yeah. So let me think. I didn't prepare very well for this. So let me think about this. So my journey in real estate, I do know my story. So I got into in about 2000, 1999, right around then. I bought a house, right? And I bought my first house in Northeast Portland. My friend had bought a house like 3 years before, honestly, 3 years before. He paid $34,000 and he was like, I swear to God, it's going to go up. This thing's going to hit 100 grand. I'm going to sell my house and go to Arizona and buy a mansion and retire. Well, not really. He was going to buy another house and keep a bunch of money too. And I shopped for a house for 3 years, not knowing what I was doing, just like driving around, looking at tiny for sale by owner signs, etc. And I watched the price go up to like $99,000 in 3 years. At $108,000, I bought my first house, bought it on contract, paid the guy 8% interest. My dad was like, you're crazy. And I sold the house like 3 years later and I made like $160,000 or something like that on it, right?
I bought my first house on a contract too. That must have been the thing back
then. Did you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I didn't have any credit. I didn't know how any of that works, but my dad was wrong, and my friend was wrong about the housing market capping out at 100K in Portland and then collapsing. Obviously, that never happened. And I was just wowed by it. At the same time, I started going to the business school at Portland State University. I graduated business school, Portland State. I think my degree actually says 2002 because I had to get one more class done because I was in a business where I had a lot of time on my hands. And actually, that's kind of true, kind of not true. I was a single dad, had this little business, and had my daughter. Graduated from business school, and then I was looking at real estate, and I refinanced my house with a mortgage broker who was totally unscrupulous. It was a girl that I knew. Got to the closing table, the rate had changed, and I was like, "What is this? So and so. What happened here?" And I called her, and she goes, "Well, I had to make some money," and I was like, what? Like she totally promised you something else. Then I realized that she had like this locus of control. The paperwork said Countrywide on it. I thought, Countrywide is doing this to me. And then I realized, wait, no, this person has some control over this. So I went down to my local mortgage office and I got a job because I didn't understand the money. I didn't understand the money around real estate. And I had gone to business school and they didn't teach me anything about personal finances around personal wealth and real estate, residential real estate, your own real estate, which was, to state the obvious, or maybe not, but my biggest asset, right? Because I made this money in this house and there was all this money there and I didn't understand how it worked or how home financing works. So I went right down there, got a job, and that was like the mortgage boom. Things were going crazy and we did all kinds of business and I learned a lot about financing homes, right? But I worked in that business for about 10 years, didn't really love it. I'm not really a numbers person, but I did love real estate, but I really got empowered by that and went and bought a couple rental houses over in Northeast Portland and Northeast Decum. People were telling me, oh, you're crazy. This is Decum. It's terrible. Well, now if you know anything about it, Decum Triangle's hot. You're supposed to go drink your little martini and hang out with your fixed gear bike, right? You're probably down there a lot. But anyway, but that's your neck of the woods, right? Don't you hang out in North Portland or Northeast?
I know, I'm in Northwest now.
Oh, moving on up. Okay, so.
I was in Northeast for 17 years, but now I'm in Northwest.
Okay, yeah, both nice parts of town. But anyways, I I built a little bit of, got a little bit of real estate. And then, I realized I really didn't like the mortgage side of things. When the mortgage meltdown happened, first of all, the mortgage industry collapsed and mortgage guys were kind of bad guys. They were like, you did this,
So are you talking about 2007, 2006?
Yeah, right?
Yeah, me too. I mean, I was a title rep back then in those days, and I would walk by and see, real estate agents crying at their desk. It was a horrible time.
Housing crisis, right? I mean,
for sure.
there's that movie about it. If you guys don't know about it, what's the movie
Big Short.
Big Short. The Big Short actually tells a pretty decent version of the story, right? It's not fiction. Anyway, so I looked across the aisle at the real estate agents, and I wasn't very impressed by the job that some of them were doing. I was like, I had real estate agents calling me with stuff like, well, there's no furnace, but can't they just get it after closing? And I was like, have you seen your clients' finances? They just put everything they have into this house, and no, that's not quite how it works. The house has to actually work in order for the bank to lend money on it. So I made the decision to make the switch into real estate. And I asked my employer to lay me off because the business wasn't good anyway. So I was just sitting on my desk and trying to do things that weren't working. So they laid me off and I started my real estate business. And I went and got my real estate license. And I went to a couple brokerages in town. And it's funny because two of them told me, no, we don't hire new guys. And within a year, they were calling me saying, hey, we want you to come over here. And I was like, I'm the new guy you said no to. So
yeah, it's interesting to me in this business that a lot of people won't take on new agents, and then they want to bring them on only after they've had the success and all the training that Keller Williams has provided. And I do love the fact that not only did you get your education here, but you've continued to grow your business here. And actually, you're truly one of my millionaire real estate agents in the office. And I love that part. So, okay, so keep going.
And when you say that, I worked the system that's in that book, whether I'm a millionaire or not. I did what's in the Millionaire Real Estate Agent book, which is a book designed by successful real estate agents, right? And ironically,
a case study. It's really just a case study. That's all that book is.
Well, here's my case study on it. I'm going to make a little dad joke here. So I bought a case of those books and I gave them away as a mortgage broker, never having read the book, to all kinds of agents, and was like, here, you should read this. I hear it's good, and I never read it. And then I became a real estate agent and I still didn't read it. And then a couple years into it, I read that book and I learned how to build like a high service, highly functioning real estate business using specialization in different roles and giving a high level of contact and a high level of customer service. And I left the little company that I was at and I came over here. It's not a little company, but I left that company and I came over here because I saw real estate agents doing business by relationship here at a high level, helping a lot of families, but not helping a lot of families in like not knowing them or not connecting or not delivering what they needed, but actually treating it like a business, like it should be. This is an important piece of your family's business, right?
Well, I think that there's so many buyers and sellers out there that are still working with people that only sell a couple houses a year, and they're not even staying in the market. So not only do you sell a lot of houses every day and week and month, but you also are running it like a true business. So that client is getting service from somebody that really does understand the fiduciary responsibility to the client. And people don't get that. Yeah.
Well, they don't. And what's interesting about our business is that I think that it takes like something like 320 hours to be an esthetician or a hairdresser in this state. And how many does it take to be a realtor? I don't even know anymore. It's like 80 hours.
Yeah, I think so.
80 hours. So it's like, it takes a third as long. I mean, this will grow back, but lose a fortune on your house, it's not going to grow back. I mean, maybe over a lot, you're not going to get that back. You could make money on a different house, I suppose, but right? It seems like it's more important than, how to cut my hair, which by the way, I haven't had a haircut in a while because of COVID time. Sorry to show up like this, but yeah.
Well, I'm sure you've enlisted somebody to cut your hair because you're really good with leverage. Okay, so what I'm going to do is move on to my next staple questions, which is what are the highs and what are the lows on real estate? And what I like to feature with a lot of the agents that I have on getting to know your realtor is what's a high for a client and what's a low for a client, and that you see, or maybe you coach people through, or even that you've gone through. And it could be advice to another real estate agent too.
What, well, there's a lot to unpack there. So
I know there is.
a high for a client or a low for a client. I mean, boy, yeah, it's so many highs, and I really appreciate when I get to help a family get through the situation. The commission kind of goes to the side at a certain point. Once you sign the contract with the family, you decide we're going to help you with this thing and we're going to move forward. And then it's like when you really accomplish the thing. And for me in the beginning, I started out doing short sales, so it was like, can I get you out from this crushing debt? That was kind of a high for me, to be honest, to say, hey, like back to the Big Short and the bad times, to be able to say, hey, there's this crushing debt on your house, and people would come to the office and say, well, but we agreed to this $700,000 loan. I feel like we should pay it. And would say things like, well, you're in a game where the other team makes the rules, and are you going to stay in this? And then we would get the bank to agree to let them out of it. So, that was the beginning of like really learning to like be helpful with people. And now there's stuff like, I've got people that, I have one client who, when I met him, I don't think he had anywhere to live. To be honest. And then there's some outside circumstances outside of real estate, but how I met this guy personally. And I saw his life change over a great deal of time, but, now he's like paying cash for sets of duplexes, and he's giving me calls about, how can he wants to know, he's building a small rental portfolio so that he doesn't have to work, so that he can be with his children. And he's a young man. He's much younger than me. I'm a young man, but he's really young because he's, 30 something. And he's in watching, real estate really, give his family leverage and give his life a life worth living, because he gets to connect with his kids every day. And that's important to him. So now he works very little. He wants to get to the point where he doesn't have to work at all. And I know that's kind of a rich man's tale, but I'm telling you, he didn't come from that. He got to that.
A lot of people don't know how much community involvement you actually do. I don't think that you're not a braggadocious person. You don't go out there and tell everybody. And I know that I was going through some struggles with even my son, and you reached out. You were the hand that helped him during that time. And I don't think a lot of people understand truly the giver that you are, because you don't have to tell the world that you're doing that. So I'm going to do it for you. And I think that what you also do is you create wealth for people. And you've had conversations with me on how to create a better life for myself as a woman and as a mother. And, people just don't see that side of you. So I like to really highlight those parts when I'm in the podcast. What are the lows, Mark? What happens in the worst parts of the real estate transaction, or that clients can expect? Hey, this is going to be a low. We know you're skilled at what you do, but tell me what happens. The tough times.
The tough times for me or for the clients?
Well, could be either, really. I mean, I think what happens in a lot of podcasts, people just want to like highlight all the great things. And I'm like, well, everything's not great. So what's the duality of it?
I have this great guy that fixes my phone. And because I'm cheap, and I go, and instead of going to the iPhone store and getting a new one, I don't even buy an iPhone, so I'm lying to you guys. It's Samsung, but I go get a new screen from this guy. He's down here on 20th in Sandy, and his name's Ming, and it's better when he says it in his accent because it sounds wise. But I came in there one day just kind of tattered. He's like, "How are you doing, Mark?" And I'm like, "Tough day." And he says to me, "Mark, if it's easy, everybody do it." Knows were his exact words. And I hear his words in my head when things get tough. And I just have to remember that real estate is great, and it can be a great lever. And when I talk about my friend, getting to a place where he might not have to work soon and all that, that's great, but it's not easy, right? And I think that there's an assumption that it's easy, especially like there's a lot of rhetoric in the I don't want to say press in the way that people say the press, but with the stuff that makes it to print and the stuff that makes it to the water cooler talk around town here, especially in Portland, is landlords, they're the rich, the bastards who've accumulated real estate, but I know in my personal story, I didn't have much when I bought my first house, and I just made it to the point where my first rental house, right? And it's hard, and so in helping people through this hard thing when they're trying to get into it, right? When they're new to real estate, or they want to get their first house, and getting them into that first house, and then you know, you see them 5 years later and they're in an entirely different financial place. But that first house can be really hard, and the market is hard right now. You know, and I list a lot of houses. Like primarily my job on my team is the listing agent. I have Ross on my team who does the buyer side. But I get beat up by other agents because like, my client is unhappy, they didn't get this house, and you're kind of a bad guy for that. And I have to, you know, deal with folks on my side of things with Ross and I when we're trying to get people into real estate. It's a hard thing, you know, to get people through that. And I think that those can be the real lows, right? In this market, this escalating market where things are changing, real estate is really changing. And, you know, I'm not necessarily happy about all those changes and how hard it's going to be for the average person to get into a house, right? Like I was talking to my team the other day, the people who work for me, younger people who, you know, probably make less than me because they work for me, right? And so they you know, they get paid well, but they, you know, it's hard to get into a house. And I'm telling people in their position, you know, it's time now to get into a house because the market's going to change and it's going to become really difficult in 5, 6, 10 years, right? And so I don't know if I really answered your question, but it's,
You did.
for me, that's hard, right?
You've always said to me, I'm going to make the bet that people are going to always want to live indoors. And I think that where a lot of people get caught up, especially the younger people right now, and I'm dealing with my daughter even she's going to be buying her first house. And one of the things that we talk about is it's not going to get easier. It's not going to get cheaper. It's not going to get, you know, there's all sorts of things that we are possibly going into a bear market. But of course, you know, we're still listening to economists coming out about that. And you know, it just doesn't. People want to live indoors, so buy a house instead of renting. So I think that you make a really good point.
Well, let me share this low with you. This is, it's a, what is it called? An anecdote when you tell a story, and that's the lesson. But, so a friend of mine, when I was a mortgage broker, so now I've been in real estate 13, 10, 23 years ago, something like that. You know, he worked at UPS and was talking to me about buying a house, and he had a daughter like me, you know, with his daughter, same age, whatever. And I was encouraging him, like, hey, you should buy a house. You know, that's a good idea for you. And we got him pre-approved, and he decided against it. And the market changed a little bit, and I called him again. You know, he was a prospect, right? So I'm the business guy calling him, hey, you should really think about buying this house. You know, I saw one over here that would fit you and your daughter. No, not right now. Years later, no, not right now. Years later, he calls me, hey, how about now? And the payment had gone up to beyond affordable for him. And true story, last year, what do you call those things on social media where they ask for money?
GoFundMe's.
GoFundMe. He's got a GoFundMe. Picture him in his car. He's like, I got a graduate degree, and this world seems to have no place for an ex-punk rocker like me. Can you send money to me? I'm a great guy, you know? And it's like, you know,
yeah,
it's a bummer, you know, because it's kind of, you know, the opportunity was there, and I think the opportunity is still there. It looks different, but you know,
people feel fearful. I mean, it's tough to make the decision.
I like what you just said there, not because I like fear, but because I always tell my team and the people that my job is to walk people through fear. And so when people talk about this business moving over to a commodity, like, oh, it's just going to be Zillow, click and buy. Well, that may be good for your really high level tech, super confident dude or gal who's, you know, sipping on espressos and making, you know, double 6 digits or whatever. But even wealthy people, when I talk to them about housing, my job is to walk people through fear. Right? Buyers and sellers alike, because sellers are afraid of losing what they have, and buyers are afraid of not getting what they want. Right? And so I feel like the real estate agent is always going to have a place as long as we know how to walk people through fear. And being able to walk people through fear means knowing the market and knowing what's going to happen next, and being able to set the expectations with the client. You know, hey, I see that you're afraid. I see that, you know, mama wants a place for her baby in a good school and she's afraid. We're going to work on it like this, or we're going to, you know, maybe buy this house and then 6 years later buy the house in the awesome school district, right? You know, like, you know,
or you can just be like me and just get stuck in your same first house and stay there for years and years and years.
Yeah, who now lives in Northwest.
I mean, yeah, and then you leverage it a little better. All right, let's talk about the 3 nuggets that people can take away from this interview to put into action.
Oh wow! Like I said, I don't know that if I don't know that I prepared properly for your interview here. So the three nuggets. Well, I think
You know,
today.
first of all, you don't have to ever prepare for my interviews because this is just getting to know you. So I love the off the cuff because that's what I want people to know is that we really don't do a bunch of practice right before these interviews. And I think people think I have it all like scripted out. I definitely don't. This is your brilliance. So I love that.
Well, I think that people need to know that they can be empowered through real estate.
Yeah.
And when I talked about my friend in the car with the GoFundMe, I think that's the train that he missed, is that there was an empowerment available for him in real estate. And maybe he didn't get through whatever fear he had or whatever it was, but for me, it's usually fear. When I don't do the next right thing or the best thing for myself, it's probably fear, right? And real estate can really empower you. Even if it's just one little cottage for you to live the rest of your life in or part of your life in, that can be a really empowering experience. And I think that's probably the big takeaway that I'd like to give people is that, well, one, real estate can empower you. Two, you're probably going to have to walk through fear. And three is that somebody will help you with it. I'm old because I just did this. That's my dad. So, but three, somebody will help you and walk you through it. It may be me, it may be somebody from my team, but it may be, another great Keller agent. It may be, Lindy Susie from the boutique agency down the street, who's also a hairdresser. I don't know, but
Hopefully not.
Yeah.
Okay. If you were to write a book, what would it be about?
Gosh. What would I write a book about? Well, I used to think that I would write a book about me because I used to think about me a lot, honestly. But now, I don't know. I think, yeah. I used to think, oh, you're just an amazing story. 80s. Yeah.
I definitely don't believe that because I've never seen that side of you. I don't even think maybe even our younger years. I've always looked at you as a go-giver. We love that book. But I think that you are. So, okay. I love that.
But I would honestly but when I think about writing, what I'm writing now is a coaching program about helping people in a certain lane of real estate, which I'm not going to disclose here. It's one that's very difficult to approach for some people. And I'm working on it with my real estate coach, who you may know who my coach is. She operates at a really high level. And she sits right next to Gary. In fact, my meetings often get canceled because she's like, I'm going to go talk to Gary Keller. And I'm like, what can I say? Great. Fit me in, But I'm working on a coaching program because I want to share what I've learned about buying and selling real estate with other people who want to buy and sell real estate. So I don't want to, I think sharing that and learning to coach is really my next move. And so writing in that direction is what I want to do.
Cool. I appreciate that. That is, I think that so many people need to have the how-tos in real estate as they come into this industry. And I think that that would be a really cool program. So awesome. Did you have a question for me?
I'm supposed to have a question for you. God, what is my question for you?
I don't know, but I like it because it always comes off the cuff from people. And I figure you usually have really good questions. So that's why I asked.
My question for you would be, how has real estate empowered you? I know you have a wonderful B&B business at the coast, right? Where people can see the ocean straight from the room. It's like Nye Beach, right? Somewhere down there.
Yep.
Tell me about that.
Well, I think that I follow in your footsteps a lot with every bit of advice that you've given today, that fear is generally what holds people back. But I would add to that and say that mindset is also the other piece of it. And if you grew up where you didn't have ever anyone in your home that had, or in your family that's ever had home ownership, it's really hard to imagine yourself becoming a homeowner. And so, I grew up, which is not a secret. I'm pretty transparent. I wear my whole story out loud, really, to the world. But I grew up very poor. My mom was on food stamps. My mom was a waitress back then. That's what they were called, not servers. So, my mom was a waitress, and we just kind of would scrap together rent, and then you had whatever government food you could get. And I didn't know that home ownership was actually a possibility, but I think what ends up happening is you get an idea in your mind somehow. And once you get that idea in your mind, if you just keep kind of going after it and you chew on it, I kind of always make the joke that I'm a chihuahua. And once I chomp on something, I refuse to let go. And I didn't want to be like my family. I wanted to build wealth. So I read a lot of books and I bought my first house, like I said, on a contract. And I started real estate almost 25 years ago. But what I started doing was flipping houses and finding lots. And so I did 13 or 15 houses my first year. And I would do one or so a month, and we would go in and I would be the painter. And then, we would put it back on the market and start over again. And so that's kind of how I got started. And then there was this big lull in 2007. There was, I owned my house, but I was barely making my mortgage payments. I was having a very tough time being a mom of 3 kids. And yet I did have that. And so what I was able to do once the market kind of changed a little bit is I borrowed some money off of my primary house, which I didn't think was possible. But the Blue Book, the Millionaire Real Estate Investor, taught me I could leverage that primary property, not make my house payments go up too much. I think that, I had 60% equity or something at that time, and bought my first real investment that I was going to hold on to forever. And I also read the book Hold by Gary Keller. So I don't know. I just read the Gary Keller books and I just kind of followed along. And I do things like I bebop down to your office and I go, hey, Mark, what are you doing? What are you doing on investments? What are you doing on? And I really talk to the people around here. So what it's done for me is, it's created a legacy for my kids. I now have a trust that my kids, are a part of, instead of, I don't know, just kind of winging it and hoping that I don't end up in a home that nobody takes care of me in. I've set it up. So,
right.
But
You're not cobbling together rent. You've got your real estate is now taking care of you instead of you paying for somebody else's real estate, right?
yeah, it took for me to believe that I deserved to have something different than my history had told me I was allowed to have.
Well, right. Your story there reminds me of something somebody said to me once. I don't remember who, or I give them credit, but somebody said, "Well, you're already buying somebody real estate. You're just not buying it for yourself." So your mom was buying somebody a house in the 80s or the 70s, right?
Right.
She just wasn't buying it for herself, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And rent. Yeah.
Wow. And you've got a great story now, because that's how real estate in your personal portfolio, for lack of a better word, or maybe that's a great word for it. But real estate has really empowered you in other ways too, right? Because you're basically the exec who runs this Keller Williams office, and I think you have a great deal to do with another office, in at least one that a lot of people don't know, like how much you actually do, right? You have a private jet that's waiting right now, and you'll fly off to Arizona and take care of them, right? And
yep, my name's on the side of it.
yeah. But then you help, you're empowering me right now through real estate, and whoever you're talking to off screen there who's helping you, I've seen you bring other people up through the business of real estate, right? So Casey in our office and others like that, right?
And I would go back to even just really giving you credit for what you said during this interview, which is real estate will give you that almost, it gives you a boost of confidence when you own your own real estate. And I think what ended up happening too, as I started growing my portfolio, is you do have confidence in the job that you're doing, and you don't live every day by fear. So while you initially have that fear, you actually gain confidence by being a homeowner and an investor. And so.
Would you say the benefits of owning real estate and or being in the real estate business are multi-perspective? There's not a singular. It's not like owning a stock where you're like, great, and then I made this. You're like, and I had 17 barbecues in 1996 that were soul feeding events, and I made salmon for 19 friends and had a jazz band in the backyard, and it was one of the coolest days of the year, or whatever,
Yeah.
It's so multi-perspective, isn't it?
It really is. And I really appreciate, and the reason why I started this podcast is to be able to interview people. Look, everybody wants to have a reputation about real estate agents, or people want to have this external view of people. But I know that the people that I work with have the highest integrity. They are some of the best-hearted people. You have been one of those people in our brokerage. You've given back to the new agents as they've started. You've given back to families. I see you in the community and the way that you give back. And the education that you give around home ownership is absolutely paramount. And I'm really grateful for being in business with you, Mark. And so thank you for doing this interview with me, because I think that it makes a difference in people's lives. And I think that you change worlds by getting people into homes.
Thanks, Leanne. I appreciate it. I appreciate you having me on here. Thanks for all you do.
Thanks for joining us today on Getting to Know Your Realtor. This episode was brought to you by Lifeline for Hope. Be sure to catch us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Stitcher, and be sure to subscribe. Thanks so much again for joining us today. Have a great day.